Good afternoon. I want to first thank Thorsten for doing such a fantastic job producing this festival, and so happy to be a part of it, and really enjoyed the talks earlier today, and particularly got a kick out of Mark Fell saying, "I didn't want the random key." I thought that was pretty good. I'm sitting down low here so I won't block the display. I'm going to show us a slideshow, brief slideshow for about 10 minutes and make a few comments about the pieces I'm going to perform, and then I'm going to play 30 minutes of music, live electronic music. So 2 pieces are level shift and visibility study, and my comments will mainly be about visibility study, but same goes for both pieces. They just sound quite different. So the starting points for these pieces are custom analog circuits that sound in audio and sub-audio realms. They're designed to be interrupted, the tones are, and reactivated by a performer as they sound. The circuits generate equal parts continuity and discontinuity as they're voiced. I don't know if it was about 10 years ago I started working in this way, using custom circuits with laptop Max MSP, and it's very inspired by Nick Collins' book, Handmade Electronic Music. And so these circuits are kind of starting with some of the core ideas he talks about in there, and I developed them from there. So this is one of the circuits. You can, I think, see the little brass rails running in parallel along the top. Those are circuit points that have been cut on the traces inside and brought to the surface so they can be shorted. So when those rails are shorted, then the circuits, the tones sound. In this particular box, I also have the 2 coins, 2 dimes in each case, that I use to short the rails. Also are sandwiching anti-static foam, and that's another way to control the box by varying the pitch of the tones a little bit when you compress the coins together. So this box, an example of a phrase on this box, just completely raw, not going through the laptop. The laptop captures event structures in the resulting analog stream and subsequently resounds them using custom digital synthesis elements in various combinations using Max. The circuit actions in turn interrupt and reactivate the synthesis elements as they play. And this is the other box I built, which is in a way simpler. It has 3 rails, and you get 2 different tones if you short either pair, and I use a penny in this case up on its edge, and this one sounds like this. That's stereo because I have 2 of these boxes and I play them one hand on each. So this is a little metaphorical diagram of something about the way I think of the elements that make up this music. There's the human element, which I've listed as indeterminate and determinate, which I think needs no further explanation. The analog circuit, which is largely indeterminate because it's very hard to control. That's part of the beauty and the nature of it. And it's electromechanical. And then the digital element, which is very much determinate for the most part, and it's programmed. And I call these domains of action because I think of them as equal actors in the piece. It's not, the human is not controlling the other two. The human is interacting with the other two, and they're interacting with each other. That's the way I like to think of it. And musically, that's definitely, I think that comes through in the music. It's the way it kind of works. They're in dialogue. The other aspect of this I would like to focus on is one of the reasons I introduced these analog circuits is that I had been working with small acoustic instruments going into the laptop prior to making these circuits. And I really liked the idea that there was this noisy, imperfect, failure mode device injected into the music to complement the formal, controlled, less fragile digital element. And to balance in those two elements seems like it's a big addition to the way the music works. This is for visibility study. This is an overall sort of a diagram, and you can see the analog circuit. And I have couple of MIDI controllers I also use to kind of change probabilities in Max. And you can see the analog circuit audio goes into the laptop and goes two places, goes to a peak detection function, and also goes down into frequency and timing, analysis, storage, and playback. The audio, three places actually, also goes through a little processing, very minor kind of processing, but important. Then it goes out. So in these pieces, you never hear the analog circuit like the raw form that I played you directly. It's always processed a little bit. And then down here, you can see there's all these voice combinations. Each of these 6 voices has 3 sub-voices that can be played. And the MIDI keys, one of the functions it does is to change the combination of voice probabilities in those soundings. Okay. So the next 2 screens go into detail about this part and also about this part. So here's the analog circuit going through peak detection, and then there's another little function here I didn't have on the previous schematic, the percent gate, which affects the delay and filtering. So I call this parametric coupling and decoupling, which I think is like super, super important in electronic music. I guess I've been doing it for years, but I never thought of it very consciously, and now I think of it consciously a lot. And that's that the analog circuit is being processed, but the control of that process is largely due to when peaks are detected in the circuit sound. So that another way to think of it is that the processing changes when a new peak is detected. And it's subtle, but I think you can hear that. I'll play, this is the raw sound again on the left, just the circuit without processing. Oops. And here's the same sound processed. Let's play that again. So that subtle shaping, processing and shaping, maybe you could hear that most of the time when it happened when there was a peak in the sound or a change in the sound. I think that coupling, what that coupling does, not all the time, I mean, you don't want it coupled all the time, you don't want it coupled none of the time, you want it coupled part of the time. what it does is it gives the circuit sound a kind of self-awareness or character, more kind of self-awareness that it doesn't have if it's just raw. The raw sound has a lot of interesting characteristics in it, but it doesn't really sound like it's listening to anything else but itself. Somehow, this seems like it's a sound, process sound, is in the world, and it's shaping itself, but it's also aware of things outside it. Maybe I need to go see a doctor, but that's kind of what I hear when those couplings are present. And the percent gate is allowing through some percentage of the peaks so that I can tune how often this coupling happens, which is also very, very important, I think. This is a sort of zoom in on a little bit lower down with the frequency and timing analysis and storage and playback, which then subsequently gets rendered on one of the voices. So I have analysis, record, and store. So this is like the diagram or a waveform of the circuit sound, and the 1 and 2 are the first two peaks. Every time it gets a peak, or Max detects a peak, it analyzes, does FFT, frequency analysis, and stores either different pieces, sometimes just one or more of the frequencies detected. It also starts, in this piece, records a clip, short clip of the audio coming in. So there's real-time sampling happening. Then when the second peak comes in, it has started a timer back here, and so it measures the elapsed time between peaks. And that elapsed time is also stored in association with this frequency. So I have sort of a frequency event that has a certain length. And also in this case, there's, sorry if I'm not speaking in the mic enough. Also in this case, there's a sample of the sound being played. Subsequent to that, later on in the piece, the data that's saved in this way is played back. This is the 3-voice part, comes into the 3-voice combination, and depending on whether that frequency follows, in this case, below 200 or between 200 and 900 or above 900, it plays a different sound or renders the data in a different sound. And just to play simple examples of these, I have a sampled clip of the circuit sound, the process circuit sound, a tone or noise. So any sequence of playback data where the frequency is changing, sometimes you'll get one, sometimes another of those. It'll switch between them depending on the frequency. This is an overall timeline for visibility study. And there's 2 parts to the piece. First part, circuit phrases are played. Of course, they're analyzed and rendered back. Right after a phrase is done, it plays kind of a rendering of that phrase using the voice structures I just talked about. Then I play another phrase, and it does that with the second phrase, but the first phrase looping is triggered back on, so you get the two phrases together, and it keeps adding them as I go. I go up to 6 phrases, and at the end I get 6 layers, rendered sound. In this particular piece, I wanted the beginning data loop renderings to sound very much, or not exactly, but closer to the original phrase that was played. So there'd be this, you could hear that relationship. But later on, I changed the voice probabilities, and the voices migrate farther away from that original circuit sound. In the second part of the piece, circuit actions, when peaks are detected, there's no more data acquisition. That's all in the first part of the piece. Second part, the circuit peaks trigger playback of very short sections of these little data loops that are then rendered differently in these different sections in the second section. Right? So that's a freer kind of dialogue that the circuit actions will start those little data playbacks, and they also stop them. So when I'm playing, sometimes there'll be a pause and there's nothing happening, and I have to play a few sounds, and suddenly a peak will trigger something to happen. And then sometimes there's sound happening, and I don't want it to happen, so I play another sound, and it stops the data loop, right? So I'm using the circuit to kind of initiate and interrupt these things in a way that's musical that I find interesting. So I hope I'm not taking too long doing this, but I'll play just these examples here of these first four conditions. And then here's the rendered looping. So that was two iterations of the first circuit phrase, and sounds a lot like the circuit phrase. You can identify it, but it also has the other tone fragments and noise elements too. And this is the next circuit phrase. And this is the rendered looping of both of them together. Okay, and then there's a little clip of what it sounds like in part two, which is quite different. Okay, just to finish up, again, this metaphorical three domains of action, the human, the circuit, and the laptop. My overall intention, musical intention, is to pull these three actors together into dialogue. And each one I think of as independent, and I try to have some sense that each one is listening to the other two. And the methods, I think the most important methods that I use is this coupling of parametric change intermittently across the three domains. And then also this sort of propagating event patterning, across the domains. So maybe it's clear, there's no pre-planned sequences made ahead of time. Every performance, I play the circuits have their character, but their details of what's played is completely different, and therefore all the event data that the rest of the pieces that performance is based on is also unique to that performance, is only gathered at that moment. And I think that helps to, again, contributes to this tying together the three qualities. It's like the trace of my actions in playing is directly related to what happens on the circuit, and then what the laptop plays is in some sense informed by those gestures on the circuit. It's kind of unifying element. Okay, so first I'm going to play level shift, which sounds quite different. It's much more austere than visibility study, and then visibility study.